Whitlock, whose side are you on, Barkley or Shaq?
I think Shaq was right in terms of don't baby DeMar DeRozan, don't baby these players. I think Shaq was right in saying, Chuck, you may have got babied a little bit. Where Shaq is wrong is, and if I were Barkley in that moment, I would have said, hey, man, if I was 7'2", they wouldn't have enough fingers to cover all the championship rings I had. And if I was 7'2", Kobe Bryant would have never run me out of L.A. And so I think Shaquille O'Neal had a great season. Great career. But Barkley, the greatest 6'4" basketball player we've ever seen, ever. 6'4". This is a game that favors height. And so I get Shaq's point and all that, but if Barkley was his size, he'd have 10 rings.
Here's why I side with Charles Barkley. First of all, there's very few elite anything. Lawyers, surgeons, basketball stars. The whole planet plays football quarterback. High school, college, Division I, Division II, Division III, Canadian football, XFL, Euro, NFL. You got 6 guys who are great quarterbacks. When you get a star, there ain't many of them. Take care of them. Secondly, it's Toronto. This isn't like Miami losing a star of the Lakers. You're Toronto. You don't baby DeMar DeRozan? All right, bye-bye. Good luck, as you've said, getting another star in Toronto. So, A, Barkley's right. You take care of stars. This other thing is, the NBA's always been a star-driven league. You
got to baby him.
Well, first of all, babying him is, well, what's babying him? Isn't that what Westbrook gets?
Yeah, and look how well it's working out there. Westbrook's your least favorite player. Now you're going to use him as the example? Give me a break.
It really depends on the temperament of the star. Greg Popovich could yell at Tim Duncan. There are other players, superstars, that wouldn't have taken it. I generally agree with Charles that you do have to have a good relationship with your best player. And I've had coaches tell me they would go up to their best player before practice. I'm going to go off on you today. It ain't nothing, but I'm going to go off on you today just for the other guys.
Not personal.
You know, yeah. So the other guys see you yelling at the best player, and then they get in line. But in this case, look, Dwayne Casey did nothing wrong with DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan had 8 points, a negative 23 plus minus,
yes.
And the bench players rallied them. And then on Tuesday, after they lost Game 4 and were swept, DeMar DeRozan said, I have nothing but respect for Dwayne Casey, and all of my success I give to him. So Charles was wrong initially, and there's nothing to repair. Those two are fine.
I think they both made valid points. You know, you're talking about Chuck and, Shaq, but at the same time, you have to understand, you need somebody at the helm to protect you from yourself sometimes. And I think Coach Casey did an excellent job of protecting DeMar from himself. He wasn't playing up to par, and he was out there embarrassing himself and taking the hit, and he wasn't taking a ton of criticism. He put that on himself by pulling him, so now he's faced with the real questions. And then he can pivot that to the coach, not to the player. So I think that he was a shield for DeMar in that situation.
Listen, I want to go back at you again on your whole, you got to baby stars. Bill Belichick's your favorite coach. Tom Brady can't stand him right now. Tom Brady's, I don't know if I'm appreciated or not. Bill Belichick ain't babying his star.
Popovich apologized essentially to LaMarcus Aldridge. Look, the NBA is a different culture. You don't, good Lord, one guy controls the whole NBA basically. And then there's one other team, LeBron and the Warriors. In the NFL,
if DeMar DeRozan was LeBron, baby. But DeMar DeRozan ain't LeBron.
In Canada?
He's a quarter of LeBron.
Oh, what time out? But in Canada?
What?
You don't get stars up to Canada.
But hold on, DeRozan is locked in. He just signed a long-term, extension, so he's locked in.
I will say this to you, though. If you create that monster, that beast, and when the problems outweigh the talent, you're going to have a bigger issue than you ever
I've been saying that about Westbrook for years.
Yeah, I know. You're all over the
That's
map.
not the case with Westbrook.
You're all over. I want to go back on my one.
I think you bringing up Barkley, Shaq. I disagree. Look, Barkley, I agree. I've said he's arguably the best player ever, inch for inch. So I agree with you. But Charles was a lot like Shaq.
That's my point.
So I'm just saying, you can't say he would have had more rings than Shaq if he was that size. He had the game, but, he didn't want to defend. He didn't work as hard. They both were kind of like, not the hardest workers in the world.
I got to be careful here.
Why?
Because
Say it with your chest.
I think
Say it with your chest.
I was mad a minute ago.
I think Charles gave more to the game than Shaq.
No.
Yes.
I mean, you can't say that.
Yes.
How?
Yeah.
Shaq won
Look at
at
Shaq.
the highest level.
No,
Charles
gave
didn't.
more.
Oh,
Shaq
you
is
mean
7'2". 7'2". That's uncoachable. That's a gift from God. You give it. You give it to me.
There are
Two dudes that didn't live up to.
A lot of them.
There are a lot of guys that big.
If Barkley was 7'2", trust me, they'd be building monuments to him.
He only got to one finals. And again, I'm with you. He was a tremendous player, but I don't think you can say he gave more than Shaq.
You can't tell the story of basketball without either of those guys.
I agree.
Well, without Shaq, you can't. You might be able to without Charles.
No.
The story, how long is
Time
the
out.
story? I mean,
It's gonna be as long as it has to be.
Shaq
You
is in
can't
there
edit
before
Charles Barkley out the
The
story
man
of
just called
basketball.
him the best player inch for inch, but now we're gonna write him out of the NBA story.
He didn't win a championship. He didn't win an MVP. Well, he was one-time MVP.
Yeah.
I mean,
How many pages is that book?
he was fantastic. But Shaq is. You mentioned Shaq before you mentioned Barkley.
Okay,
I'll say
yeah, but let's be honest. When Shaq went to the Lakers, that was bigger than any brand in America outside maybe the Cowboys. Now, it slipped some because the NBA is more global and you don't need cities as much. But Shaq had the benefit of, I don't know, the Laker brand and Pat Riley. Charles played in Philadelphia.
Which is Philadelphia was a great franchise.
Phil Jackson.
Oh, Pat Riley in Miami.
Pat Riley in Miami, Phil Jackson, Laker brand. I mean, come on, Charles went to Phoenix. By the way, how's Phoenix mostly been for the last 50 years? They were good during him. They were good for a couple years with Nash.
Charles, look, I really think he's arguably the best player ever, inch for inch. But he was not Shaq. He just wasn't. And Philly, you poo-pooing Philly. Philly was a great franchise.
10 inches shorter is the whole difference between those two. That's it. 10 inches.
Well, okay,
That's the
but
difference.
you could say that about LeBron and Allen Iverson or something. I mean,
the
they're
game
the size.
favors the big dudes. And Shaq was favored. He didn't give more than Barkley. And so he can wave his ring around. I like Shaq a lot. I defended Shaq over Kobe the entire time. But don't wave your finger in front of Barkley like that again, Shaq.
When dynasties, Warriors, face really, really good teams, Rockets, this is what happens. It's a 5 or 6 game series to the dynasty. Utah Jazz were a really good team. They had an MVP too, Karl Malone. They were the #1 seed, and then they faced a sick Bulls team. They matched up well with the Bulls, but in the end, Chicago in the biggest games in that series always prevailed.
Who's Michael Jordan for the Warriors? I don't see a Michael Jordan on the Warriors.
Steph.
I don't see a Michael Jordan on the Warriors. You see a Michael Jordan on the Warriors? The Michael Jordan of this era plays in Cleveland.
Okay, but the #2 on Golden State is better than their two, Steph or Durant. The #3 on Golden State, Clay, is better than their 3, Kukoc.
What about the entirety of the team? They've played 3 times this year. When the Rockets were at full strength, they beat them twice. Look, man, where's Steph Curry going to hide defensively in this series? There's no place for him to hide this series. This is a 7-game series.
Oh, come on.
This is a 7-game series that, look, I would favor Golden State, but the Rockets can win this series.
Oh, no.
I'll give them a chance. I'll give them a 25% chance.
That's not much of one.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as close as you're saying, but yeah, there are things to like about the Rockets. The interesting thing, and you saw it with Draymond Green's comments, I talked to somebody in Golden State the other day, and they're like, they can't wait to get Houston. Because you can see it with Drake. Like, they're like, and he said, because they've been talking so much trash, Clint Capella, we're the better team, all the stuff they've been saying, I think you might see Golden State play better than ever in this series. And if that's the case, it could be a quick series. But I like the Rockets, and with three-point shooting, anything can happen, and we know they put up a ton of threes, so I'll give them a shot.
I like the Rockets also, but I don't like them in this series to win. I say 6. The Warriors win in 6. And, you know, we referred back to the regular season where we talked about LeBron being so dominant. That's the same thing we talked about with the Toronto Raptors. They was dominant in the regular season. They played it extremely well. But when the postseason
you just compare
came,
Toronto to Houston. You compared Houston
we're talking
to
about
Toronto.
teams being dominant in the regular season, and then all of a sudden you go to another season, which is the postseason. It's a different beast. It's a different animal. Every possession matters. It's different.
Who's the Chris Paul, James Harden in Toronto? It's not a fair comparison.
But here's the thing, too. Chris Paul has been spectacular these last 3 games. James Harden hasn't. If you look at the playoffs, they've had a couple games where they've both been at their peak. But for the most part, it's been Harden was great, Paul was so-so. Paul was great, Harden was so-so. They both gonna have to be at their peak performance every night.
Harden was sick last night.
Played the way he played last night for 5 games in this series in order for them to be special.
Some of Houston really, not a break because they earned it, but they faced Minnesota in the opening series. That's the team that doesn't match up in the West at all against Houston. They don't shoot threes.
Who else in the West was going to beat them?
Well, no. And so that was their first matchup, and they walked through them. Well, then they got another great matchup. Utah's a middle-of-the-pack three-point
So San
shooting
Antonio
team.
would have beat him in the second.
Well,
Who?
let me ask
Other than
this.
Golden State, who?
I think Anthony Davis could have been a pain for them. I think Greg Popovich. Houston got really ideal matchups from a bad three-point shooting team and a team led by a rookie against Harden and Paul, 2 veterans. It's all worked out well for Houston.
Capella, Harden, Paul. 50-5 when all 3 take the court this season. But let's just ignore all of that, and they have no shot.
I wonder what the record is for the death lineup.
It ain't 50-5.
It's championships.
Yeah, 2-0 when they start. Listen, you would acknowledge the NBA's always been about 2 seasons. You could argue 3. The officials even officiate games differently now. Let's say the officials say, we're gonna let, and they do this when you get to the conference finals and the finals. They because officials don't want to decide games. They let you be more physical. Who's got the more physical roster? I got a Draymond Green.
That's it. That's as far as you're going to go with it. That's as far. I got Draymond Green. That's as far as you go.
Because
Steph Curry,
Capella, PJ Tucker's physical.
all them light-skinned suburban brothers. Like, they talking about physical side.
Hey, watch it. Watch it now. We coming back.
Hey, hold on. I consider myself light-skinned too, man. Hold up.